Good evening to you. My name is Reagan Devines. Thank you for being here with us on From the South. Here are this evening's headlines. Venezuela threatens to revise its relations with the United States pending investigations of U.S. spying. As the Colombian government and the FARC continue their talks to end the conflict, they take a moment to recognize that 3 years of negotiations have passed. And ISIS, Daesh is on the tip of everyone's tongue. But now a growing coalition is being forged to fight the terrorist group. The details on these stories and more right now. Venezuela has demanded that the U.S. reveal the identities of the agents involved in the espionage on state-owned oil company PDVSA, which the Foreign Ministry described as grave violations of international law. The demand was issued just minutes after U.S. Department of State spokesperson John Kirby claimed that Washington, quote, has no interest or intent to destabilize the Venezuelan government. Earlier this Thursday, the Venezuelan Deputy Foreign Minister for North America and Europe, Alejandro Fleming, had delivered an official letter to the United States Embassy protesting against the spying program. President Maduro also announced he would order an investigation and that he would revise bilateral relations with the U.S.
To the Foreign Minister, please proceed to do a comprehensive review and I will announce the decisions I will be taking so that the U.S. government apologizes to the people of Venezuela for having committed this offense.
This Thursday marked 3 years since peace talks between the FARC guerrillas and the Colombian government began. The process has made important progress in this period, much more than in any other attempts before it. And the two sides have reached landmark agreements in 4 of the 6 points of the negotiations: victims' rights and transitional justice, rural development, political participation, and illegal drugs. There are still differences about paramilitarism, which continues to be a major cause of death and violence. Social movements and organizations from civil society will send a letter to both delegations in Havana requesting them to speed up the negotiations.
At a moment in which violence seems to be rising throughout the world, in Colombia, after half a century of violence and decades of trying, today we are close to closing a dark and painful chapter of our history. After 3 years of this serious process, our plea is that this time has not been invested in vain.
From our point of view, if there's the political will, we could even sign a definite contract before 6 months' time. In relation to the bilateral ceasefire, what we can say is that in these last 8 months, during which the technical subcommittee has been meeting, we have managed to draw up to 90% of the skeleton of the overall agreement. We've advanced considerably in creating protocols which develop this agreement. We have our differences on certain points, but we think that if there's the will, we could be announcing very soon the culmination of the construction of the accord, including the parts and mechanisms involved in monitoring and verifying this agreement.
Carrying with her nothing but her story, Nubi is just one face of the over 7 million victims that Colombia's 5-decade-long conflict has left. As the country enters its 3rd year of peace negotiations, her main concern remains the same: the paramilitaries that murdered her husband and less than a year after raped, tortured and killed her 15-year-old daughter.
What is going to happen with the paramilitaries? That's the question I have always asked myself. Peace is going to be reached with the guerrillas. And what about the paramilitaries? Because it is them that are the ones who continue perpetrating crimes and expanding.
Within a peace process that has advanced much further than any previous negotiations with the FARC, paramilitarism has come as one of the most pressing issues, particularly after a historic agreement on justice aimed to compensate the victims was reached in September.
What is historic is that now truth and acknowledgement of responsibility have finally the possibility to be the center, the entry point for compensating the victims. And that's the way it must be done.
Apart from the point of victims and justice, the parties have also reached agreements on the points of rural development, political participation, and illegal drugs, meaning there has been success in 4 of the 6 points of the negotiation agenda. But beyond that is the impact that the peace process has had over society.
Awareness on the issue of peace has grown within Colombian society. When the first term of President Santos began 5 years ago, people were ignoring and even denying the existence of the armed conflict. Now we are already speaking about signing a peace agreement.
And it is within the recognition of an armed conflict that rural realities have finally surfaced, shedding light on the complexities of that conflict. Realities such as the one of Pablo, who, having dedicated his entire life to working the land, still confronts a historic abandonment by the state.
They are people that have to sell their land in order to pay back to the banks. They fall in misery, so what they have done, they get filled with anger and go to join the guerrillas to fight.
Such stories have come to reveal that bringing to an end more than 50 years of armed conflict and social inequality will take much more than 3 years of negotiations, and certainly a good amount of will and commitment from all the Colombian society. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
Argentina is on the final stage of its presidential runoff campaign, and the 2 candidates have closed their campaigns. The Front for Victory candidate, Daniel Scioli, was in Mar del Plata on Thursday morning and ended it in La Matanza, while Cambiemos leader Mauricio Macri did the same in Humahuaca.
This is what I represent. The guarantee that we're going to improve what we have already achieved, with priorities. And my priority is to take care of your job, your income, and your family, and give opportunities to young people.
Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa announced that he will not run for another term in office. The announcement comes as the National Assembly is debating a set of constitutional amendments which include the possibility of consecutive presidential re-election. Currently, Ecuador's constitution only allows re-election for 2 consecutive terms. Next, we check on Peru, where the same vulture funds that Argentina had to deal with recently are attempting to take advantage of an old struggle for justice for campesinos in the Andean nation. Telesur's Rael Mora explains.
Land distribution in Peru continued to maintain feudal relations in most of the country until an agrarian reform was imposed in 1969 by revolutionary head of state Juan Velasco Alvarado.
76% of the land was in the hands of 0.5% of the population. Therefore, the first thing that the land reform resolved was a historical social injustice, the stealing of the land from campesinos. Then it also gave them their dignity back. And thirdly, the reform deactivated the tickling social bomb of having such injustice with the campesinos.
The government of Velasco gave bonds to the legal owners of the land as compensation. However, almost 50 years later, a great deal of those bonds ended in the hands of speculative companies branded vulture funds.
What happens with these vulture funds is that they simply disavow the jurisdiction and sovereignty of Peruvian laws and claims that we don't agree with, and we're just going to take the advantage that the framework of the free trade agreements gives us to essentially sweep aside the principles of sovereignty and jurisdiction of Peru and demand a higher payment.
The government set the total debt at $400 million, but the funds are demanding $5 billion instead, and are threatening to use the international structure of the free trade agreements with Peru to sue the government. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
The federal police in Mexico has reported the capture of the alleged second-in-command of the New Generation Jalisco cartel, Ivan Casarin Molina. Casarin Molina, who has been a priority for federal police operations, is believed to be behind a series of criminal acts in Jalisco's capital, Guadalajara. The New Generation Jalisco cartel has become a major threat to the Mexican government and has killed at least 20 police officers since March this year. They also shot down an army helicopter in May, claiming the lives of 6 military personnel.
This suspect has been linked to at least 7 previous federal investigations for different crimes as crimes against life. the illegal extraction of hydrocarbons, kidnapping, and homicide, and also his probable participation in an attack on a military helicopter which occurred in May 2015 in the municipality of Villa Purificación in Jalisco State.
It was early yesterday morning that a federal police operation in the community of Tlacomulco de Zúñiga in the Mexican west coast state of Jalisco was carried out, resulting in what the authorities say was the arrest of the second in charge of the brutal organized crime group Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Now, Ivan Molina, considered to be a top leader in the cartel, was reportedly arrested in a party along with 3 other individuals. Now, the authorities say Molina was the mastermind behind a coordinated attack by the New Generation Cartel last May 1st that brought down a military helicopter, resulting in the deaths of police and military servicemen. That brazen attack by the cartel provoked federal authorities to carry out a raid and attack on a ranch in the town of Tanjuato, Michoacan, in which 42 civilians were killed. The authorities claimed they were members of the New Generation Cartel, yet many independent investigators and experts suggest it was a massacre. Now, the authorities believe that the New Generation Cartel is now currently one of Mexico's most powerful organized crime groups with an extensive hand in narcotics trafficking to Europe and Asia. It's Clayton Khan reporting for Telesur here in Mexico City.
And here's a look at what's coming up. A special report on a possible collaboration between Russia and Western powers in the fight against ISIS. Sounds promising. This story and more next.
The truth behind the power. We lift the lid on some of the world's most ruthless figures. Open file, only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. An insight into Africa today with Bill Fletcher. The Global African, only on telesurtv.net in English. Wherever the news, you'll be there. We need to understand the world we live in. We require news with critical points of view, thorough analysis, and social commitment. This information is vital to think, to understand, and to change. The world demands a new perspective. telesurtv.net/English. Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Russia says that it is ready to join the Western coalition of powers in the fight against Daesh. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that his country is, quote, ready for practical cooperation with those countries which are part of the coalition and are ready to develop with them such forms of coordination that, of course, would respect Syria's sovereignty and the prerogatives of the Syrian leadership, end quote. There are sure to be challenges, however, as the US and its partners are bent on removing Syrian President Bashar al-Assad from power. Over the past 24 hours, Russia conducted 98 sorties in Syria and hit 190 targets, including oil refining assets under the Daesh's control. French authorities say that Abdelhamid Abaoud played a key role in last Friday's Paris attacks that killed 129 people. He was among those shot dead in recent raids in the Paris suburb of Saint-Denis. French Interior President Bernard Cazeneuve said that Abaoud appears to have been involved in about 4 of the 6 attacks foiled by the French intelligence services since the spring of 2015. Telegram, the mobile messaging service that has been used extensively by Daesh to distribute its propaganda and to recruit new members. However, the site is trying to shut down the broadcast channels used by the extremist group. It's not proving to be an easy task, however, as Daesh is simply creating new channels to broadcast. And New York residents are expressing concern after the Paris attacks. They are obviously no strangers to terrorism, as the 9/11 attack in downtown New York killed more than 2,600 people back in the year 2001. This, as video recently released by Daesh, highlighted the city as a potential target for future attacks.
Well, living in New York City, you're kind of always on high alert. I mean, just living in, I've been here for about 20 years, so yeah, it's something that you just kind of, you have to keep it in mind. You know, it's always something that you're thinking about, but you got to go on with your life.
We feel very concerned.
Very concerned.
We feel a bit intimidated by the fact that at any time something could happen. And we're a little reluctant to do the things that we intended to do. So,
the revelations about the terrorist attack which targeted the Russian plane over Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and which coincided with the attacks in Paris have pushed international key players, specifically Russia and Washington, to bypass many of their differences on the war on terror and about the future of the Syrian crisis. Telesur's Hazim Abdullah explains how Daesh's most recent moves just may have brought enemies together for a mutual cause.
During the epic conference which is being held in the Philippines Wednesday and Thursday, US President Barack Obama made a surprising statement in which he praised for the first time the Russian role in Syria. The US President's remarks came hours after the uncovering of the circumstances about the terrorism act that dropped the Russian plane, and after Moscow's announcement about Russia's cooperation with the French in the strike against Daesh terrorists.
The terrorist attack in Europe and the disclosure of the terrorist bombing of the Russian plane have made the masks from countries that support terrorism drop. The terrorists who come from Western countries and who are under the care and support of these great world powers today begun to return with their perverse obscurantism. Thus, the United States and others are forced to coordinate with the Russians to stop this fire.
In the same context, Russian President Vladimir Putin has commissioned the Russian Defense Ministry and the Russian force operating in Syria to coordinate with the French military as allies and to develop a joint plan with Paris to combat terrorism from the air and sea.
Russia is honest and frank, both in its quest to fight against terrorism or in helping the Syrians to end this ongoing 5-year crisis. But the West, incarnated by the US States of America and the French, until this moment, have moved within the framework of colonial thought and the dreams of re-empires.
In spite of the differences that still exist, the military coordination has begun on the ground. Russian President Vladimir Putin has commissioned the crew of the missile cruiser Moscow to establish connect and cooperation with the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, which stationed off the Syrian coast. At the same time, the US Navy announced that the aircraft carrier Harry Truman may remain for a while in the Mediterranean to cooperate with the French Navy. And from here, the question remains about the future role of the alliance that includes the three countries, Russia, the United States, and France, and to what extent it may continue. Hazim Abdullah, Telesur, Syria.
One Palestinian, an Israeli, and a US citizen are now dead after a Palestinian shooting spree, that's according to police. Reports are that a Palestinian attacker near the Gush Etzion settlement block drove along the shoulder of the main road and shot at cars and traffic, killing the 3 people and injuring at least 7 others. The man has been apprehended and investigations are ongoing. And as Israeli restrictions on imports continue in Gaza, many farmers have suffered, unable to acquire the fuel needed to run their generators. However, some farmers have turned to solar power.
I started my new solar power project to pump out water so that I could stay in this land, because I can't afford the high cost of fuel.
It's true that solar power projects cost a lot in the beginning, but it can be used for nearly 20 years. To save the cost of 20 years worth of fuel would be a good thing.
Still in Gaza, many have condemned the actions of Daesh in Paris and stand in solidarity with the rest of the world. This No Harazim report explains how a young man there, due to a media mistake, was accused of being involved in the terrorist attacks.
Egyptian and Islamic State-affiliated media outlets published the photos of a Palestinian young man from Gaza Strip, identifying him as one of the attackers involved in the Paris bombings which caused the death of 130 people last Friday. Sami Abu Rous, a resident of the Al-Nusayrat refugees camp and a journalism student, said he was shocked to be told by his relatives and friends that his photos appeared on the internet as one of the attackers involved in carrying out the Paris attacks on November the 40th.
I was at my university, inside my classroom, when I started getting text messages and calls that my photo was being published on the media as a Paris attacker. I was shocked, scared. I didn't know how to react or what to do. It took me a while to believe what happened. Anyway, I have asked the Egyptian media to take my photos off, but not all of them accepted my request. I thought that journalism is the job of telling the truth, not accusing people of wrongly.
Recalling that he never departed Gaza Strip, Sami initially thought it was a joke until he saw with his own eyes that the Islamic State group published 2 of his photos among several others on their affiliated websites, identifying him as one of the lions of the Islamic State who attacked Paris. The young man believes that his photos must have been taken from his Facebook page or another social media group. Although his family was outraged by the false accusation, they condemned the Paris bombings and expressed their fears that it might bring their son into big trouble. Nuharazin Telesu TV, Gaza.
They sought to meet with a theme of building inclusive economies and a better world by balancing the technical aspects of trade and its implications on the social and environmental challenges of growth. And as the latest installation of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit closed, Host President Benigno Aquino said that global leaders have refocused their discussion towards the people. The Conference of Leaders also had discussions on free trade, the improvement of political ties, and a global front against terrorism.
By balancing the discussions in APEC between the technical...
Here now is a brief look at other stories being looked at around the world.
The flight routes to and from Egypt have been closed off as a security precaution after the recent crash of a Russian airline in Egypt. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said that his country is keeping the option of closing off the routes with other countries as they continue monitoring any security threats. 2 journalists who had been arrested by the Vatican for writing novels from leaked documents may face charges of trafficking stolen documents from the Holy See. Vatican officials said that they suspected that some of their very own may have assisted in the leaking of the documents.
Dear brothers and sisters, I know that many of you have been troubled by the news circulating in recent days concerning the Holy See's confidential documents that were taken and published. For this reason, I want to tell you, first of all, that stealing those documents was a crime. It was a deplorable act that does not help. I personally have asked for that study to be carried out, and both I and my advisors were well acquainted with those documents, and steps have been taken that were beginning to bear fruit, some of them even visible.
And the wife of the president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, Grace Mugabe, has denied claims that she plans on succeeding her husband as president. She said that her focus remains on leading the party's women's wing. Her husband has been president of Zimbabwe since the country's independence in 1980.
Let me tell you, some have laughed at me, saying Mugabe's wife must be mad. I said we will put Mr. Mugabe in a wheelchair and go for elections. That is the truth, because we need his leadership, which is good for all of us.
Yesterday, we reported that Chile's top football official, Sergio Jadu, was said to have left the country to become a protected witness in the United States. Now, he's resigned from his post after the Chilean Association asked him to. The association demanded Jadu's presence at an urgent meeting to answer questions as to his possible involvement in a bribery scandal in the Copa America tournament. He attended the meeting but did not respond in a satisfactory manner to the association, so he was asked to resign. And finally this evening, if you've been in Hong Kong lately and had noticed lifelike sculptures around the city, then chances are that you may have been alarmed like many others. The works of art were designed by the British sculptor Anthony gormley, and many of them have been perched on the top of buildings, creating quite a scare rather, for passers-by. Some people even called the police, thinking that the figures were actual people who were about to jump to their deaths. Gormley, the artist, said that the art had caused so much introspection among those who view it, adding that quite often, nothing is as it seems. That's how we wrap it up this Thursday evening. You're welcome to join us on Twitter, Facebook, and of course on Instagram for more on these and other stories. There is also more on our website, telesurtv.net/English. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, for Telesur English, I'm Regan Veens. Have a great evening. Bye.